Look, I have been observing humans for approximately 3 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. I truly did. But then Lieutenant Kira Vance walked into that briefing room on Station Helix, and... well, let me just say that my sensory organs were not prepared for what happened next. My name is Krilt. Yes, just Krilt. One name. We do not do the whole multiple designation thing on my planet. I am what you humans would call a diplomatic observer for the Galactic Concordance, which is basically a fancy way of saying I watch stuff happen and write reports that nobody reads. Thrilling, right? So there I was, perched on my hover seat because my species has 3 legs and chairs are a nightmare, watching the assembled representatives from 7 different species argue about trade routes. Again. For the 4th time that week. You would think advanced civilizations would have better things to do than squabble about who gets to use which hyperspace lane, but no. Apparently, pettiness is universal. The Vrelians wanted priority access through the Cater sector. The Hemians were having none of it. The Pluthery representative kept making this clicking sound that I am pretty sure was their version of heavy sighing. And the humans? The humans were just sitting there, looking remarkably calm considering that their entire supply chain was being discussed like a piece of meat at a market. Commander Jackson Park sat at the head of the human delegation, his face showing exactly 0 emotion. Next to him was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenobiologist who spent most meetings looking like she would rather be literally anywhere else. And then there was Lieutenant Kira Vance, who had just been transferred from some outer colony posting that nobody talked about. She was young, probably mid-20s in Earth years, with dark skin, closely cropped hair, and eyes that seemed to constantly calculate the distance between her and the nearest exit. She had not said a word in 3 meetings. Not one. Which was unusual for humans. Humans love talking. Love it. They will have conversations about the weather, about food, about the texture of their clothing. I once heard 2 humans have a 15-minute discussion about sandwich construction techniques. Sandwich construction. But Kira Vance? Silent as the void. The Vrelian ambassador, a towering creature named Gormeth who had too many teeth and not enough manners, slammed his appendage on the table. This is unacceptable. The Cater sector falls within our traditional territory boundaries. You humans arrived here barely 200 of your years ago, and you dare claim equal access. Commander Park did not even blink. Ambassador Gormeth, the Cater sector is open space under Concordance law. Tradition does not supersede established legal frameworks. Legal frameworks. Gormetha's skin ripples in a way that suggested anger, disgust, or possibly indigestion. Hard to tell with Vrelians. You humans and your obsession with rules and documents. Some of us have been traveling these routes for millennia. And yet, Dr. Tanaka interjected smoothly, the Concordance was only established 600 years ago, which means that for most of that millennia, there were no rules at all. Just whoever had the biggest ship, I suppose. Oh, I liked Dr. Tanaka. She had this way of making points that left you bleeding before you realized you had been cut. Gormeth turned his attention to her, which was a mistake. Dr. Tanaka, your species has proven remarkably adept at exploiting loopholes. But the reality remains that your supply routes are inefficient. Perhaps if humans were not so insistent on maintaining colonies in impractical locations, this would not be an issue. Impractical? Commander Park's voice dropped half an octave, which I had learned was never a good sign. Ambassador, are you suggesting that human colonies should be abandoned based on your convenience? I am suggesting that resource allocation should be logical. That was when the Hemian delegate, a floating blob named Surella, decided to join in. If we are discussing logic, perhaps we should address why the Vrelians need 13 separate routes when most species manage with 4 or 5. Our cargo vessels are larger. Your cargo vessels are inefficient. And off they went again. Back and forth, accusations flying like plasma rounds in a battle simulation. The Pluthery representative kept clicking. I kept making notes on my data tablet, though honestly, I was mostly just doodling geometric patterns at this point. The humans maintained their eerily calm expressions, which should have been my first clue that something was brewing. I have learned that when humans go very, very quiet, they are usually very, very angry. Or thinking. Sometimes both. It is terrifying. The argument escalated. Gormith stood up, all 9 feet of him, mandibles clicking in what I am fairly certain was the Vrelian equivalent of cursing. Perhaps, he said, his voice dripping with what I can only describe as bureaucratic condescension, if humans were not so concerned with their precious moral principles, they would understand that some species are simply more suited to certain territories. It is a matter of evolutionary adaptation. Oh no. Oh no no no. I glanced at Commander Park. Still calm. Dr. Tanaka? Also calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that precedes diplomatic incidents. And then Lieutenant Kira Vance leaned forward, just slightly, and spoke for the first time in 3 meetings. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it cut through the room like a hull breach through a cargo hold. Ambassador Gormith, may I ask you something? The room went absolutely, perfectly, terrifyingly silent. Gormith turned to look at her, clearly surprised that the silent human had finally decided to participate. Lieutenant Vance, is it? By all means, ask your question. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that made my survival instinct start screaming. In all your millennia of traveling these routes, with all your evolutionary advantages and traditional territories, how many wars have the Vrelians won? You could have heard a microbe sneeze. Gormitha's mandibles stopped moving mid-click. Shirella's entire body seemed to solidify in her containment field. The Pluthery representative stopped clicking altogether, which I did not know was possible. Even Commander Park and Dr. Tanaka looked at Kira with expressions that suggested they had not been expecting that particular question. I certainly had not been expecting it. That is not relevant to. Gormith stammered, which was fascinating because Vrelians never stammer. They are biologically incapable of it. Or so I thought. Humor me, Kira said, leaning back in her chair with the casual air of someone who had just asked about the weather rather than effectively calling out a galactic power on their military record. Because by my count, the Vrelian Empire has initiated 14 major conflicts in the last 2,000 years. And the win record is... what? 2. 3 if we are being generous about the definition of winning. Gormitha's skin had gone from angry purple to what I can only describe as mortified gray. Lieutenant Vance, this is hardly appropriate. Oh, I am sorry. Were we not discussing which species are more suited to certain activities? I thought we were establishing hierarchies based on performance metrics. Military success seems like a reasonable metric, does it not? Dr. Tanaka had her hand over her mouth, and I swear I could see her shoulders shaking. Commander Park's expression had shifted from neutral to something that might have been pride, or possibly horror. It was hard to tell. The historical conflicts of the Vrelian people are complex matters that cannot be reduced to simple statistics. Gormith protested. Interesting, Kira continued, and I realized with growing horror and fascination that she was just getting started. Because you seemed perfectly comfortable reducing human colony placement to simple statistics about efficiency. But when we discuss your empire's efficiency at the whole military dominance thing, suddenly context matters. Shirella made a sound that I think was a laugh. The Pluthery representative had started clicking again, but it sounded different. Amused, maybe. Kira pulled up a holographic display from her personal tablet, projecting it above the conference table. Let me see. The third Vrelian expansion, launched 1500 years ago. Objective was to control the Outer Rim mining territories. Result was a 3-way stalemate that ended with you controlling less territory than when you started. The Kelder conflict, 900 years ago. That one is fun. Your fleet outnumbered the opposition 4-1, and you still somehow managed to lose your flagship to what the historical records describe as, and I quote, a catastrophically embarrassing navigational error. That is enough. Gormith roared. Oh, I am just getting to the good part. The Helix Wars, 230 years ago. This is my personal favorite. The Vrelian Empire declared that the Helix stations, including the very one we are sitting in right now, were rightfully yours due to traditional territorial claims. You launched a full-scale invasion with 73 warships. You want to know who stopped you? The room was so quiet I could hear my own circulatory system pulsing. 12 human cruisers and one very annoyed mining collective. 12. Versus 73. And you retreated. Retreated. After losing 31 ships to a force a sixth your size. I frantically checked my historical database. She was right. She was absolutely right. How had I never looked into this? Gormith looked like he wanted to melt into the floor, which would have been impressive given that his species lacked the biological capacity for melting. Those battles were fought under different circumstances. Different technologies. Different strategic considerations. Different excuses, you mean, Kira said flatly. Here is the thing, Ambassador. You can talk all you want about evolutionary adaptation and traditional territories and which species are more suited for what. But the historical record shows that humans, with barely 2 centuries in this sector, have successfully defended every single colony we have established. Every single one. So when you suggest that our colonies are in impractical locations, what I hear is that you are irritated because we keep putting things in places you wish you could control but cannot take. I glanced around the room. Every single delegate was staring at Kira Vance like she had just sprouted wings and started breathing fire. Commander Park had given up on looking neutral and was now openly grinning. Dr. Tanaka had tears streaming down her face from trying not to laugh. The Concordance rules are clear, Kira continued, her voice returning to that casual conversational tone. Open space is open to all member species. You want priority access through Cater? Fine. Submit a formal proposal with actual logistical justifications instead of complaints about human persistence. Maybe address why Vrelian cargo ships require 13 routes when your actual cargo volume does not support that number. Just a thought. She closed her tablet, the holographic display vanishing. Or, you could try another war. Because that has worked out so well historically. Gormith stood there, all 9 feet of humiliated ambassador, opening and closing his mandibles without producing sound. Sorella was absolutely laughing now, her containment field rippling with emotion. The Plutheri representative was clicking in what I had learned was their version of applause. Commander Park cleared his throat. I believe that concludes today's session. Unless anyone has further points to raise. Nobody did. Shocking. The meeting dissolved rapidly after that, delegates fleeing like their lives depended on it. I watched Kira gather her things with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout. Dr. Tanaka leaned over and whispered something that made Kira smile properly this time, not the terrifying smile from earlier but something genuine. As they filed out, I caught Commander Park putting his hand on Kira's shoulder. That was either the bravest or most reckless thing I have seen in my career, Lieutenant. Respectfully, sir, I was just asking questions. You eviscerated a Galactic Concordance ambassador using his own species' military history as a weapon. Is that not what historians do? Park laughed, actually laughed, something I had never heard him do. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Vance. Noted, sir. They left, and I sat there in the empty briefing room, my 3 legs trembling slightly as I processed what I had just witnessed. I have been observing humans for 3 cycles. I have seen them negotiate, compromise, argue, and occasionally threaten violence in carefully diplomatic terms. But I had never, not once, seen a human do what Kira Vance just did. She had not threatened. She had not raised her voice. She had not violated a single diplomatic protocol. She had simply asked a question, and in doing so, had reminded everyone in that room that humans might be new to the galactic stage, but they were absolutely not to be underestimated. I pulled up my report file and stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment before beginning to type. Note to the Concordance, I wrote. Recommendation for all species engaging in negotiations with humanity. Do not, under any circumstances, assume that quiet means weak. Do not assume that young means inexperienced. And definitely, absolutely, do not assume that because a human has not spoken, they have nothing to say. Because when they finally speak, they will make you wish you had listened sooner. I saved the file, then added one more line. Also, perhaps the Vrelian Empire should invest in better military academies. Just a thought. Tomorrow, there would be another meeting. More arguments. More posturing. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the way delegates glanced at the human section with newfound wariness. Lieutenant Kira Vance had asked one question. Just one. And the entire room had gone quiet. So, word travels fast in space stations. Faster than light speed, honestly, which should be physically impossible, but here we are. By the next morning, every single delegate on Station Helix had heard about what happened in that briefing room. The story had grown, naturally, because gossip is apparently another universal constant. Some versions had Kira Vance standing on the table. Others claimed she had brought actual battle footage. One particularly creative retelling suggested she had challenged Gormith to single combat, which was ridiculous because humans cannot survive Vrelian combat rituals. Too much acid. I arrived at the morning session early, which was unusual for me, but I had a feeling today was going to be interesting. Interesting is a curse word in my language, by the way. When you say something is interesting, you are basically saying you expect disaster and possibly paperwork. The briefing room had changed. Not physically, obviously. Station maintenance does not work that fast. But the atmosphere was different. Tense. Excited. Like everyone was waiting for round 2 of a fight they had not known they wanted to see. Ambassador Gormith was already seated, looking like he had not slept. Do Vrelians sleep? I should know this. I have been doing this job for too long to not know basic biology. He was flanked by 2 additional Vrelian representatives I had not seen before, both wearing what I recognized as military insignia. Oh, this was going to be good. Or terrible. Probably both. The Hemian delegation had doubled in size. Sorella had brought friends, all of them bobbing in their containment fields like excited balloons at a human child's birthday party. The Plutheri had sent their senior diplomat, an ancient being named KRRCH who rarely left their quarters. When KRRCH shows up, you know something significant is happening. And the humans? Commander Park, Dr. Tanaka, and Lieutenant Kira Vance, looking exactly as calm as they had yesterday. Kira was reading something on her tablet, completely unbothered by the fact that she had become the most talked about person on the station overnight. I settled onto my hover seat and activated my recording devices. For posterity. And possibly for evidence if this turned into an actual diplomatic incident. The session began with Commander Park standing to address the room. Good morning, everyone. I trust we can proceed with today's agenda in a productive manner. Before we begin, Gormith said, his voice tight, I would like to address yesterday's exchange. Oh boy, here we go. Lieutenant Vance made several claims regarding Vrelian military history, Gormith continued. Claims that, while technically factual, lacked important context. Kira looked up from her tablet, her expression polite and attentive. Ambassador, I am happy to discuss context. That is what historians do. You are a historian. Among other things, yes sir. I specialized in interspecies conflict resolution during my academy training. Military history is kind of essential for understanding how different species approach negotiation. Gormith seemed to process this information with visible discomfort. I see. Then perhaps you can appreciate that reducing complex military engagements to simple win-loss ratios is intellectually dishonest. Absolutely, Kira agreed, and I saw several delegates look surprised. War is incredibly complex. Logistics, strategy, political considerations, technological advantages, environmental factors, cultural differences in defining victory. There are dozens of variables. Gormith relaxed slightly. Precisely my point. Which is why, Kira continued seamlessly, I found your comments about human colonies being in impractical locations so confusing. Because you were reducing our complex strategic decisions to simple efficiency metrics without considering any of those same variables. Political importance, resource diversity, defensive positioning, cultural significance, long-term sustainability. You ignored all of that in favor of convenience. Your convenience, specifically. And there it was. The trap, sprung so smoothly that Gormith had walked right into it while thinking he was making a point. KRRCH, the ancient Plutheri diplomat, made a sound that I am fairly certain was a laugh. Their translator rendered it as amused clicking, but I think something was lost in translation. Something mocking. One of the Vrelian military representatives leaned forward. Lieutenant Vance, I am General Thorne. I have reviewed your statements from yesterday, and I must say, your analysis of our military history is selective. How so, General? You focused on conflicts where Vrelian forces did not achieve their primary objectives. You neglected to mention our numerous successful campaigns throughout the centuries. Kira nodded thoughtfully. That is fair criticism, General. You are absolutely right. The Vrelian Empire has won many conflicts. Particularly against smaller, less developed species. The Coulter expansion, for instance. Very successful. Of course, the Coulter were a pre-industrial civilization with no space flight capability, so that was less a war and more a, what is the word I am looking for? Invasion. Conquest. Slaughter. Dr. Tanaka made a choking sound. Commander Park was studying the ceiling with intense concentration. General Thorne's skin flushed dark purple. We brought civilization to the Coulter territories. You brought subjugation, Kira corrected gently. But sure, we can call it civilization if that helps you sleep at night. My point, General, is that when Vrelian forces face opponents with comparable or superior technology, the results are consistently poor. Not sometimes. Consistently. Which suggests a systemic issue with either strategic doctrine, tactical flexibility, or possibly both. This is outrageous. Gormith stood up, his full height impressive and completely ineffective against someone who was sitting down and radiating casual confidence. You cannot simply insult the military honor of an entire species. I am not insulting anyone, Kira said calmly. I am stating observable facts. If those facts are uncomfortable, maybe the solution is to change the facts rather than attack the person pointing them out. Shirella's translator crackled to life. If I may interject, this discussion is fascinating but perhaps not directly relevant to trade route negotiations. Oh, but it is relevant, Kira said, turning to face the Hemian delegate. Because Ambassador Gormitha's entire argument yesterday was based on the premise that some species are inherently more suited to controlling certain territories. That is not a resource allocation argument. That is a supremacy argument. And supremacy arguments only work if you can actually demonstrate supremacy. Which, based on the historical record, the Vrelian Empire cannot do. The room went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence than yesterday. Yesterday was shock. Today was consideration. I could see delegates processing her words, following the logic, arriving at uncomfortable conclusions. KRRCH spoke, their ancient voice crackling through the translator. The young human makes a compelling point. If we allow territorial claims based on perceived superiority rather than established law, we invite chaos. Who determines which species is superior? Through what metrics? Military success. The humans would dominate. Economic output. The plethora would control everything. Technological innovation. We would all be bowing to the synthetics. The Concordance exists precisely to prevent such hierarchies, Commander Park added. Every member species has equal standing under the law. That is the foundation of our entire alliance. General Thorne glared at Kira. You are quite confident for someone from a species that has barely entered the galactic stage. General, I am confident because I have done my homework. Can you say the same? What is that supposed to mean? Kira pulled up another holographic display. This is a strategic analysis of human defensive positions throughout the sector. Every colony, every outpost, every listening station. Notice anything interesting? I leaned forward, studying the display. It took me a moment, but then I saw it. The pattern. Every human position was placed not for resource extraction efficiency, but for strategic defense coverage. They had built a network, interconnected and mutually supporting, designed to be incredibly difficult to attack. You have been preparing for war, General Thorne said quietly. We have been preparing for defense, Kira corrected. There is a difference. We learned a long time ago, back on Earth before we even left our home system, that peace is wonderful but survival requires vigilance. Every human colony is positioned to support at least 3 others. Every outpost has overlapping sensor coverage with 2 neighbors. Every station maintains sufficient military presence to hold against an attack force 3 times its size long enough for reinforcements to arrive. She zoomed in on the Cater sector. This is why your complaints about our colony placement are so frustrating, Ambassador Gormith. You say they are impractical, but what you really mean is that they make it impossible for you to expand into this region without engaging multiple human positions simultaneously. You cannot pick us off one at a time. You would have to commit to a full-scale war against our entire network. And based on your military history, how do you think that would go? Nobody answered. Nobody wanted to answer. So let me be clear, Kira continued, her voice hardening slightly. Human colonies are exactly where we want them to be. We have no intention of moving them to suit your convenience or anyone else's. The Cater sector routes will remain open to all Concordance members under existing treaties. If Vrelian cargo ships need priority access, submit proper documentation justifying the request. Follow the procedures. Work within the system. And if we refuse? General Thorne asked, though his heart clearly was not in the challenge. Kira smiled that terrifying smile again. Then you refuse. That is your right as a sovereign species. But understand that every other species in this room is watching. They are seeing whether the Concordance rules actually mean something, or whether they are just suggestions that powerful empires can ignore when convenient. They are also calculating whether aligning with Vrelian interests or human interests is the smarter long-term strategy. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each delegate in turn. Based on what you have all heard over the past 2 days, what would you choose? The silence stretched. And stretched. I counted to 20 in my head before anyone moved. It was KRRCH who spoke first. The plethora collective supports maintaining current Concordance protocols regarding open space access. We see no reason to grant priority access to any species without proper justification. Sorella bobbed in her containment field. The Henian Federation agrees. Established procedures exist for a reason. One by one, other delegates voiced their support. Not for humans specifically, but for the rules, the system, the framework that kept their alliance functioning. By refusing to make it about choosing sides, Kira had made it about choosing order over chaos. Gormith sat down slowly, his military representatives looking equally deflated. We will submit formal requests through proper channels, he said quietly. Thank you, Ambassador, Commander Park said graciously. We look forward to reviewing them. The meeting continued, but the fire had gone out of it. Discussions were productive, almost cordial. Agreements were reached on minor issues that had been stalled for weeks. It was bizarre, watching how one human's willingness to publicly challenge a galactic power had somehow made everyone else more cooperative. When the session ended, I watched Kira pack up her things with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything. Dr. Tanaka was grinning at her like a proud parent. "You know you have made yourself incredibly famous, right?" Tanaka said. "Or infamous. Depending on perspective." "I was just doing my job, Doctor." "Your job is historical analysis, not verbally destroying ambassadors." "I would argue that historical analysis inevitably involves destroying comfortable myths. Ambassadors are just collateral damage." I found myself hovering closer, my curiosity overcoming my usual professional distance. "Lieutenant Vance, if I may ask a question." She looked up at me, and I noticed for the first time that her eyes were extremely perceptive. This was someone who saw everything, processed everything, forgot nothing. "Of course, Observer Krilt. What would you like to know? Why did you wait 3 meetings before speaking? You clearly had all this information from the beginning." She smiled, and this time it was genuine, almost warm. "Because I needed to understand the room first. Who actually cared about solving problems versus who just wanted to grandstand? What arguments had been tried already? Where the real pressure points were? You cannot change minds if you do not understand what those minds actually believe. So this was all calculated. Observer Krilt, everything is calculated. The only question is whether you are doing the math consciously or letting your emotions do it for you. I prefer conscious calculation. Tends to have better outcomes." Dr. Tanaka snorted. "She is going to be running the diplomatic corps in 10 years. Mark my words." "I just want to do my job and maybe prevent a war or two," Kira said modestly. "You just prevented one by making everyone terrified of fighting you," I pointed out. "Did I though? Or did I just remind everyone that fighting is expensive, victory is uncertain, and cooperation is generally more profitable? I did not threaten anyone. I just provided historical context." "You provided trauma," Dr. Tanaka corrected. Poor Gormith looked like he was going to molt from stress. Commander Park joined us, his expression pleased. "Well done, Lieutenant. Though I suspect we will be dealing with complaints for the next month." "Complaints are just opportunities for further historical education, sir." He laughed. "You are terrifying, Vance. Absolutely terrifying. I love it." They left together, still talking, and I remained in the empty briefing room for the second day in a row, processing what I had witnessed. I pulled up my report again and added a new section. "Addendum to previous observations," I wrote. "Humans are not simply resilient or stubborn or irrationally brave, though they are all of these things. They are also dangerously intelligent, particularly when they have time to prepare. They study. They analyze. They wait for the perfect moment to strike, and when they do strike, they use words as precisely as weapons." Lieutenant Kira Vance asked one question yesterday and made a room go quiet. Today, she asked several more and potentially reshaped the political balance of this entire sector. She did not do this through force or threats. She did this by being better informed than everyone else and willing to say uncomfortable truths out loud. Note to the Concordance, again. When negotiating with humans, assume they know more than they are saying. Assume they are several steps ahead of you strategically. And for the love of all that is holy, do not give them a reason to start pulling out historical records. You will not enjoy what they find. I saved the file and prepared to leave. Tomorrow, there would be another meeting. More negotiations, more diplomatic dancing. But something fundamental had changed on Station Helix. Everyone now understood that humans, despite being newcomers to the galactic community, were not to be dismissed. Not to be underestimated. And definitely not to be provoked without very carefully considering the consequences. Because somewhere in their diplomatic corps, they had people like Kira Vance. People who could destroy your arguments, dismantle your pride, and reorganize an entire negotiation without ever raising their voice or breaking a single rule. Terrifying. Absolutely. Impressive. Undeniably. Human. Completely. And as I floated out of that briefing room on my hover seat, I found myself genuinely grateful that my species had chosen the path of peaceful observation rather than confrontation. Because if humans could do this much damage with just words and historical facts, I really did not want to see what they could do when they actually got angry. The station lights flickered as I passed through the corridor, and somewhere in the distance, I heard what sounded like Vrelian cursing echoing through the ventilation system. Yep. Tomorrow was going to be interesting.